A very warm welcome to all of you on behalf of Azim Premji University. We are delighted to be presenting today's program in our series of public lectures that are organized in our 3 university campus cities, Bangalore, Bhopal, and Ranchi. We started these lectures 12 years ago, and all of them, over 250 so far, are recorded and made available on our YouTube channel. This is the 3rd lecture in the calendar year 2026. Public lectures are one of the ways in which the Azim Premji Foundation promotes its vision and its responsibility for public education, bridging the divide between what is called the town and the gown. For those who are other than students, I know all of you are here because you are invested in education and development of the country. You are well-wishers of Azim Premji University, and of course, because of our speaker and the fascinating topic of today. Thank you very much. A brief introduction to the speaker and the interlocutor. About the speaker. Dr. Anika Kuusisto is Professor of Early Childhood Education at the University of Helsinki and a leading scholar of education, worldviews, religion, and childhood studies. She holds a PhD in education from the University of Helsinki. Her research focuses on how children and young people develop values, belonging, and existential resilience in diverse and unequal societies. Professor Kuusisto has previously held senior academic roles at Stockholm University and is an honorary research fellow at the University of Oxford. She has published over 180 scholarly works and is co-editor of the Oxford Handbook of Religion and Education. Our public lectures follow a format where we have the speaker deliver their talk, and then one of my colleagues from the university engages the speaker in a short conversation. Today, it will be my colleague Kinnari Pandya. Kinnari is with the School of Education at our Bangalore campus. Her work spans higher education program development and implementation, public policy and curriculum development, research and writing on education, teacher education, and early childhood care and education. She has co-edited 2 books. Interestingly, she anchors a podcast series called The First 1,000 Days and Beyond, featuring thought leaders in the early childhood care and education domain in India. Please join me in welcoming Professor Anika Kuusisto.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome and thank you so much for coming here tonight. So nice to see you all here. With this picture, I want to also welcome you. This is how it looks like in Helsinki right now. It has been minus 23 degrees. So I'm actually quite happy to be here also in that respect. Yes. So I will start with some summary of what I want to talk about today. So basically, as an introduction, somehow what we know of the societies already throughout human history, there has always been obviously a lot of diversity. And this is what Steven Werthowek calls the old diversity. But now, during the recent decades, with the globalization and so-called shrinking of the world, because of the internet, a lot of transnational movement and different family ties, transnational families, etc., the everyday has become even more diverse all of the time. What, again, Werthowek calls the diversifying of diversities or super diversity. And it's also this kind of the layered, intersecting diversities of, for example, languages, religions, etc. And this has also meant that in the everyday of children and youth, there's more and more polarization, more and more differences in the ways of seeing and interpreting the world. So basically the worldviews or the ways of looking at the world. And that really challenges us as educators. for supporting children to understand first of all themselves, their own family background, their family history, the national history in different ways, but also being empathetic to the peers and their different perspectives to life. And of course, education here really plays a key role in supporting the development of this kind of worldview competence or understanding and knowledge and skills about the different ways of seeing the world, for example, religions and other worldviews. But also in supporting the development of resilience and the sense of belonging to the school community and society. So basically, when a child feels that they are part of peer group, they also have a totally different way of connection with the society. But some of the children, at least according to the Finnish and Nordic studies recently, more and more children feel excluded and ostracized, or basically they are excluded from the peer group. And if you have this kind of experiences throughout your growing up years, then that leaves you very vulnerable to all kinds of mental health issues and other risk behavior. So what I'm going to do here, I will show you some findings, basically mainly from young children, from a recent project we are doing. I think it's very interesting to see how the very young children build their worldviews and values and their way of seeing the world. And although these children are from Finland and they are, of course, these processes are always context related, I thought that it's a nice way of looking at also the global childhoods and the ways in which we can think of the children's growing up and youth in different settings also, of course, here. So first, a few words about the notions that I'm using here. So basically, when I say worldview, I refer to this individual's unique ontological, epistemological, ethical orientation to the world. So basically, to put it into a normal language, so basically because it's like a philosophy of life, but it's also something that we look back to when we interpret the everyday events in our lives. I like to use this kind of example of missing the bus. When you miss the bus in the morning on your way to work, so how do you interpret that situation? Do you think that, okay, yes, I read from my horoscope that today is not a good day for me? Or do you say that, okay, I think it was maybe divine guidance that I was actually left from the bus because I needed to meet this person that I then started chatting with on the bus stop? So this kind of interpretations that we make, the meaning making that we do all the time in our everyday, each one of us. And then also worldview can refer to group values. So for example, religious or ideological or political or some other values that we share with others. And then of course that's connected to our own identity, who is us in the sense that, okay, this is the people who also believe that it was divine guidance that I didn't make it to the bus, for example, that we have we have a connection when it comes to these interpretations of the everyday happenings. And this is, of course, connected to also your place in the world, what Heidegger would call being in the world. But there's also, of course, different ways of finding your own place in the socio-ecological system of our world and universe. And this is not only context in terms of, for example, a country or city or a community, but also, of course, in time, when you are born in the history, etc. And this kind of worldviews, they can really merge different religious and non-religious, cultural, all kinds of elements. For example, we see in the children's data that they are taking a lot of influence from children's culture, movies and films and books and that kind of things. So they are often also hybrid. And we, of course, all have it's like a Lego wall built with bricks of values that makes our own this kind of unique worldviews. And values, they are these Lego bricks basically in our worldview. They are some of the elements that we think personally that are really very important to ourselves. And this is something that, of course, partly comes from our family background, what has been considered important and valuable when in our growing up context when we were children. And then gradually, of course, through the individual agency, when the children grow up, they start becoming more and more independent in like through their own agency, navigating these kind of influences that, okay, this is where I agree with my parents, but this is where I agree more with my teachers, for example, or my peers, or this really makes sense what my friend is doing or their family is doing. So gradually we are, of course, all navigating this kind of value navigation or negotiations in our everyday. But basically what I refer to as values is this kind of what is important in an individual's life. And then when it comes to the notion of resilience, so initially in the history of science, resilience was studied mainly from the perspective of why some children and young people really flourished in their life against all odds. So even if we knew that there were a lot of risk factors in their family background, some of the individuals just basically make it. And whereas the others with the same background factors didn't. So that really interested this kind of interdisciplinary group of quite a lot of them were psychologists, but also other disciplines there. And what they were looking at was this like coping despite adversity. So even if there were a lot of challenges and threatening circumstances, these kids did well. But then gradually, researchers realized that it's not only the individual, but there is also something more in the family support, or there's a particular teacher or the community that supports these kids. So it was like the researcher gaze was like zoomed out, and more interest was on the societies and this kind of systemic approach to what kind of communities support the children to thrive and flourish. And this is called, for example, the eco-social perspective. And then also this kind of resilience as a systemic reaction to stress. For example, the pandemic, if we think of the different countries, how differently different countries dealt with the pandemic and what kind of things, how did it affect the everyday of the children and youth in different countries. For example, I was just then working 5 years in Sweden, so my children who are now teenagers, so they would have had a very different everyday from Finland, which is just our country of origin. So their peers in Finland, they were in lockdown, but my younger went to school throughout the pandemic without any closures in a very big city center school in Stockholm. So this kind of responses to big risks or wars or something like that comes to the societal level, they are of course so that's basically what the systemic resilience refers to. Okay, so what's the point of how do these tie together? So basically what I said about worldview, so that's the foundation for values and beliefs and knowledge that we construct. And then the values were the Lego bricks there, and resilience like the capacity to bounce back. It's like a vaccine. Okay, now I'm vaccinated to this thing. And then what we have been mainly interested in during the recent years, so I'm directing an Academy of Finland research project looking at existential resilience. And this is basically the resilience related to finding your own place, related to your own existence, your own being in the world. How do you Also because many children and young people are like struggling with, for example, they stress about the climate change and that kind of things, and they are worried about the basically world burning. So like how this kind of threats and how the individuals and societies and the world as a whole, how we can sort of struggle with those, or the existential resilience is related to that kind of threats and how the individual can cope with that. And then, of course, all of this is connected also to sense of belonging. Like, do you have to struggle with these anxieties on your own, or is it us who struggle against those together? And also, like I said, this kind of exclusion in peer group that has very lasting effects on young people. So it's very important that we are supporting children's and young people's sense of belonging and their connections with each other. So we have used here this Eric Allard's classic theory of well-being, and then it has been also developed further by other scholars. For example, us in the previous project where we combined it with resilience as a notion with Koirikivi and Benjamin. And this is how our version of the or our previous version of the model looks like. So basically, it illustrates how the challenges come from outside the individual, and then how our social relationships and what we are doing in the everyday, what kind of resources we have from home, we have food and shelter, etc., and also what kind of identity we have, the meaningful. I will go through this a bit closer later. So that all like determines how our well-being is constructed based on this. And I'm drawing. So this is some of the projects that I have been doing across, I guess, like 30 years almost now, which sounds very scary actually. And so I'm drawing mainly from those three bubbles that are projects funded by the Finnish Research Council. One of them was looking at the young children's values. Then the present one, like I said, is looking at the existential resilience in early childhood. And then the third one was looking into like the worldview construction in schools and how schools could support young people in those. And when we think of this context where the children and young people are actually constructing their worldviews, well, like I said in the beginning, I always tend to go ahead my own slides. So basically, the foundation is given in the family and the community. Say, for example, it can be a congregation, temple community. It can be any kind of like neighborhood community or some other meaningful interaction, that kind of social ties that the family has, or it can be extended family. So more and more parents have, at least in the Nordic countries, somehow drifted away from this traditional community or communality. Also because they have maybe moved away from the extended family and so on, but also the family value or educational value of individualization has become more and more important to many younger parents. And there has been, for example, a lot of thinking that, okay, we will let her or him decide for themselves when they grow up. So we don't maybe talk about, any kind of worldview to them now, or any values or anything, what is right or wrong at home. And we will just decide, or let them decide themselves. But actually, it is quite useful we don't think about home language like that either. We don't say that, okay, we don't speak to you for 18 years and we will see what you start saying when you are 18. It works maybe a bit better to rather provide some foundation that the child or youth can then gradually start even opposing to if they want. But there's some kind of groundwork to what to start with, and then build on that basically. And of course also families and environments, like we said, the schools, they are very diverse in values, so they will anyway meet the diversity gradually. And even there, if you don't have anything to somehow stand for, like any kind of foundation for yourself, you are much more likely to drift according to the peer group if you don't have any, like, okay, this is where I stand. So it's much better to have some kind of foundation and then go and change that gradually if you like. But then also, and this is actually this kind of disruptions in the family history is what has also been called in theoretical literature the like cuts in the chain in memory in the family history, that there is like that parents have decided that we don't continue this kind of family history traditions usually nowadays as well. And also this kind of grand narratives that have been maybe for many people also in my generation have felt that, okay, the growing up was so like, okay, we were banged in the head with Bible or something. I mean, this is the kind of, so maybe we have also wanted to do something different. Often, I think every generation wants to do something a bit differently than the previous one. But then ends up when they have children, then they end up doing many similar things again as well. But the point is that these, although these grand narratives in the family history, they might have also been a bit like given you quite limited space for doing your own thing. At the same time, they have also brought security. So it's a like a tension in this balance when growing up, and this is, I guess, the situation for every single generation and individual. And this also comes in play in this meaning of life and meaning making type of questions. But the point is also that because of all this, the children and youth are sometimes more and more on their own in deciding their own path. And they might feel that, okay, they have a lot of freedom, but sometimes it might be also a lot to handle when they are younger. Yes, and also this kind of sense of meaning in life has been measured in Finland, and the recent youth barometers have said that the young people's sense of meaning in their life has been going down all the time. And that is basically what we have been very much worried about as educators, that like what is causing this? It can't be just the pandemic, it can't just be any of these factors, but there has to be like a lot of different things causing this. And this is just an illustrator of what I have already said, basically, that there's like a different, more broader things in the society and community and family and individual that are like shaping the individual's growing up context a lot. And this kind of oh yes, and then I also wanted to say that also very young children hold some kind of worldview. And this is something that we sometimes maybe forget as educators, that we think that, oh, but you know, she or he is only 3, they maybe don't have any kind of worldview yet, or we think that whatever we teach at school is like their first, somehow we pour water to the empty bucket, but that isn't the case. There is already a lot of stuff in that bucket, and we should just try to also recognize this as educators, that we have all these different backgrounds in the classroom. But then when we look at of course the children, when they grow up, there's more and more need for them to feel that they are included in the peer group. And if you come from a smaller minority in your classroom context, whatever factor is behind that feeling, for example, I'm the only Anika in the whole Finland, so I always felt like a minority because I had such an odd name. And it can be like any kind of thing. It doesn't always have to be any of these like societal or sociological markers of identity or minority in that sense. It can be just something like different. So then they want to feel that they belong, and they also, because of that, might want to go with the flow when it comes to values. which might often also mean that they might go against their family values or community values, and this creates this kind of negotiation. But also this kind of exclusion and bullying is surprisingly typical in the peer groups. So we have measured this in Estonia, Finland, and Sweden, and half of the pupils reported having experienced bullying or exclusion. Half. That's actually quite a lot out of this almost like 3,000 kids. And most vulnerable pupils were from families with different home languages than the rest of the peer group or some other minority identifiers. And especially if you had like several of these intersecting minority positions. And then, so we have, based on empirical data, we have also done this kind of model where we look at the value negotiations, and this kind of tensions can also happen in say school or early childhood education, when the family values and the community values or school values, if there is a differences there. For example, in the Finnish and Swedish data sets, and also when I have been speaking with the teachers and principals, they have given very good examples of situations where, for example, the school says that this child would need like extra support in, say, mathematics. And then the family thinks that, no, it's not the best interest of my child to be taken away from the classroom. And then maybe they get a stamp in their forehead that they are like feeling that they are not as bright as the other kids or something like that. So both the school and the family are actually thinking of the child's best interest, but they define it differently. So this is kind of quite a typical value negotiation that we would go through in the school when we think of the educator perspective, in the family educators or family parents, and then the school community. So it doesn't have to be let's say like a cultural or anything like that dilemma, but it can very often be one of these everyday things that we all want the best to our own children, and the school always wants the best for all the pupils, and how we define best just might not be exactly the same. Actually, like in this example, they might be quite different. So we have basically looked at, we have made this model where you can look both the individual life trajectories, like where you and how you construct the values and worldviews, but also it can be used to look at the process of how this value negotiation with the family, for example, would proceed. And this is the research project that we are working with right now. And actually, Kinnari has been working a lot now together with this group. So we are organizing now a conference where Kinnari has been very importantly contributing to. So it's next summer. And then I will bring you some examples from the young children's data. I have picked, if some of you were in the other lecture I gave last week, I have included some of the same ones, because these are just some of the pet examples that I have in the big data that we have. We have now about 100 children in the new data, and I had 45 in my previous one, but I just like this so much because they inform us so well, or illustrate the children's thinking and how bright they are, how very good they are in solving also these kind of value tensions, but also how rich childhoods they live in their imaginary and like magical childhood worlds. So I have asked this girl, she's 6, I have asked, what is important in you, yourself? And she says, well, that I am in life, and that I have friends, and that I have mom and dad, and they love me. And I have a big brother and a dog, although it will die soon. And then I'm like, oh, okay, how come? Well, he's also so terribly old, he's blind even. And then I asked, what happens to your old dog when he dies? And then she says, he leaves for the Rainbow Bridge, I think. And this also illustrates her worldview, that it is not Christian, but maybe like a sort of typical secular Finnish family. And she also tells about her pretend play with her best friend. Oh, and can some of you guess what is in the picture? Yes, exactly. Yes, you are much better than many of my Finnish audiences. Yes. So it is from the preschool playground, a slide. You can see the kids climbing up and sliding down. And this was drawn by one of the children in the data when I was asking what is important in your everyday. So play with friends was very important to many children. And of course, it really illustrates how important this kind of social connectedness and relatedness is also for the very young children. Yeah, but anyway, so this girl says that in pretend play, they really have magical powers. And then she continues that as if magic would exist, and then that there is this kind of magic land, which is what they had in their pretend play. And then this is also one of my favorite examples when she says about this. So I have taken 2 cases here out of this big data. And about this school start that she's going to face. So this is around Easter, like April in Finland. And then the school start is in August. So I was asking, how does it feel to start school? So she says she's very excited. She's looking forward to having homework and like these big kids things. But then she's also a bit worried about being on her own sometimes in the mornings or afternoons, because in Finland very often children get the key to your home, and when you are 7 you are expected to walk to school on your own. So then sometimes they might have, and this is especially in the smaller cities where you don't have so much traffic, that you can actually walk to school on your own, and it's not you don't have to take public transport, for example. So then she was a bit worried or anxious about that, and she says that in being on my own there is some sort of sensitivity still, that one does not linger all on her own at home when it is so silent. That silence does something with the brain, sort of. It makes, from movies and other things, some scary bits from movies and puts them into that dark place. In the way that they are not there really, but one can see it anyhow. And then one does not almost dare to go anywhere on her own when no one else is anywhere very close by. And then she says that her mom, when she has talked about this to her parents, her mom says that she could get me a magic stone for my birthday present. And then I could govern myself with those. This is a direct quote. It's not a translation mistake. She has said, govern myself with those, with my brains, now that I'm afraid of being at home on my own, for that sort of governing. So she says that although she doesn't believe in magic, she chooses to believe in the magic stone that her mother will give her, because that will give her resilience, in the sense that it will help her not being anxious about being at home. So it's very interesting how this kind of magical thinking of the childhood can be used as a resilience generating means. And then this is also a very nice example. A boy of the same age, I have called him Väinö in the data. So these are, of course, all fabricated names. So when I asked him what is important and valuable to you in your everyday, so he says, and is there much anything that is important in me? Important is that I am. I wouldn't even want that I lived, guess why? Because I don't want to die ever. 'Cause then you decompose and then there is nothing. Some believe one becomes an angel, but that doesn't happen. If one decomposes, then one cannot do anything. And then I ask, who believes one becomes an angel? Well, Mom does. I know she believes that because she says that all the time. I never want to die, I want to live all the time. I would like to be born again with the same name. Mom thinks that some can be born again, but that happens to really few people. Does she believe in some God or something else? Yes, cause that is known that they exist, God and Jesus. When a person is killed, he can go to heaven. Does that not happen unless one is killed? No. Or when that Jesus was killed and then died again, then one can go to heaven. that is really boring, that not everyone has other options than being decomposed. So here you can see that both the sort of secular Christianity influences around the home, but a home where he is living in, there, like clearly the mother believes, but clearly somebody else doesn't. So you can really see how he is struggling between these different, like negotiating the values and actually feeling existential anxiety, which according to theories doesn't happen in this age at all. I was in touch with one of the philosophers in Finland about this example, and he said first, no, existential anxiety begins when you are like teenage or up from that age group. And then I showed this example, and he was like, okay, I agree, it does. If this is like, you got a tape recording of this, yes, I suppose you are right. That also very young children have existential anxieties. And then also we have a lot of different data from how the parents have been interviewed as well. Like for example, in this data. So first the child had said that the most important thing for me in the universe is knowledge, to search and discover new miraculous things. And then the parent has said, my child has an understanding of the fact that when a person dies, their existence ends. We have told our children that after death, the person no longer exists. I think that they have understood this quite well. And then the same child has drawn, because they could create this kind of data with the tablet computers themselves. So she has drawn a square worm who likes moons, and it has been wondering why the moon is so big. Space and the moon are important because they are nice, and there might be some new things out there. So this is again like combining somehow also the magical thinking, but the very like based on scientific facts. And then we had a lot of data where the children were, for example, somewhere saying about this, their favorite places in the nature, and that kind of like how you get the gratitude from life's small pleasures, what I have coined with the enchantment from the Weber famous lecture, the 1918. And then also this kind of all kind of different where they appreciate beauty, and because some things bring me joy. We also had very nice data where they speak about what they want to do when they grow up, like what kind of future aspirations the young children have. And also when somebody, some of them also took a very practical stance to like when you die. So then somebody had said, if they die, I'll be sad and make a big funeral if somebody who they love dies. And then I will go on and live with other people. So very practical. Yeah. But most of all, so this kind of security, predictability, everyday life, and time spent with family were really something that both the guardians and also the children brought up. And then also this was a nice example where when a child, so I think she was 5 or 6, so she had this penguin soft toy that belongs to both daddy and me. Daddy can only use it when I'm staying overnight somewhere else or when I'm traveling with mom, for example. So basically the child felt that she is so important to her daddy that this penguin soft toy will help the daddy when she's away, and clearly also it illustrates how daddy almost can't cope without her, which was, I think, very nice. And then, yes, then there are many other examples, and best friends were also brought up very much, and also this kind of family connections and love and that kind of things. So about a third of this data was explicitly focused on other people, how these kind of social relationships were very important to the children. And then also a fourth of the children, they brought up also this kind of like what is important that I can do, this kind of how they can express themselves. Also everyday environment was coming a lot in this data. And then toys and play, like we saw in the plush toy example, and then the nature and universe were also there. And what we have done based on the previous model that I showed you, and then the data that we have now classified, so we have basically used the 4 elements of the sustainable well-being and put the sense of meaning, and according to the psychological and philosophical theories, the sense of meaning in life is built out of 3 different elements. So basically the experience coherence and the significance and direction that the individual experiences when it comes to their own life and their own existence. So we have basically added these to the previous model of well-being, sustainable well-being and resilience, and then added this kind of existential level or layer there. And so I just will go quickly through what these different elements are. And these are very relevant when we think of the educator perspective. So basically if we want to support, and of course we do want to support the young people and children in their resilience and their social connectedness and value and worldview formation. So this is kind of the 4 elements that should be taken into account in the educator life or the everyday. And of course, I mean, I'm not saying that math and language and reading and writing, arithmetics, they are not important. Of course they are. But learning cannot happen if the well-being isn't there first. So we have to take care of well-being, and then so these are basically the elements that we have categorized as this kind of existential well-being. And of course, this is just one way of categorizing these, but basically, so the having dimension is very much connected to the basic safety and security, food, home, rest, and also psychological safety. That we can feel that we are appreciated at home and at school, and we have people that we can trust in that sense that they can provide for us, and we can also help there. And also routines and rituals are very important. Like all of you know who have been seeing young children in the everyday. So it's very important that some things happen in the same way every day. That brings a lot of safety to the everyday. But also this kind of cultural resources and language, for example, expressing one's emotions or conceptualizing and reflecting life questions. So if we don't know what sad and glad and all the other things stand for, then it's very different for us to maybe even understand ourselves. Like, what am I feeling now? I'm feeling very bad and I don't know why, because you really need the words for those. So having all of this dimension is really to do with resources, prerequisites, and ownership. What do we have in our skill set and safety? Then the loving, of course, these are also all interrelated, but the loving is mainly the relationships, connections, and love. So also this existential resilience builds on relationality, but basically we need to feel recognized and accepted in our everyday. The experience of being loved and valuable unconditionally and as a whole, including one's religious or other worldview and other markers that are significant for one's identity. And I think that, there's a scholar my colleague in the Netherlands who talks about this. So Michel van den Broek, he talks about this pedagogical love and how every teacher should have pedagogical love towards every child in the classroom. And I think that is very relevant in the sense that we often, when we think of diversity, we sometimes neglect things like social problems in the home that can also go across the social classes or this kind of matters. For example, when I was a very young scholar and I was doing my first interviews with the young children, then I had this very fancy, colorful picture that I showed all the children, and then I asked, okay, so what do you think about this picture? And there's a lot of children there. I will show you the picture later. So how do you feel about this like diversity in preschool? And then, so he said, oh no, just one more thing I need to say, that he had been away from preschool the previous day when I had talked to all the other children. So then that's why I only interviewed him that day, and he started saying, so yesterday, so my dad only took one beer, and then only one beer, and then just only one beer more, and then only one more beer. And clearly, so this wasn't like a social class question or ethnicity question or religion question or language question, but still it was very much to do with this child's well-being. And so it turned out that he had been sick that day and at home with a father who had been drinking all day. And then I thought, okay, now I realized that I really have to start seeing the preschool diversity in a totally different way than what I had done until then. So I had been thinking, I have been reading all these theories about, the language development and using multiple languages and cultures and how we encounter each other, etc. And then comes this one child and really stops me and makes me realize, okay, there's more to this than the theories like that. So basically, this is what I think that is maybe most important that we do in preschools and schools, that we have this kind of recognition and acceptance. And what especially in Sweden they talk about as the compensatory role of preschool or school, where really where especially the children who don't get, for example, this kind of care at home, there the preschool or whatever educational setting can really compensate and support with that. And we have all read from newspapers or somewhere else about these stories where people say that it was only this one teacher who believed in me, and that's what made it for me. That's how I coped. That's how I could live like a normal life, because there was that one teacher when I was 7 or whatever. It can be years ago, and that one person giving you recognition and acceptance. So this kind of experience of being loved and valuable is very important for one's identity, and also to be able to give back is very important. Like the youth barometer again. So that's a very big national survey that is done in Finland every year. So there, one of the things giving most meaning to young people was when they can help others. So that you can feel that you are important to others, not only that they love me because I am what I am, but I can also help and support them. Then the other dimension there is being this kind of my identity and meaning, existence. So I exist and that matters, like in the examples I showed you. So finding meaning and purpose, ability to reflect and ponder life and death, good and evil, etc. But then also this kind of that you can have future prospects. And that's again something that the school or preschool can really contribute to. Because we know that there are very many studies that say that, for example, girls are more supported to do this and this kind of work, and boys are supported to do this and this. So that this kind of divides could be also open. There might be a girl wanted to do the other one and boy wanted to do the other one, so that we would really give the opportunity for everybody to go to the direction that they want to go personally. So that kind of things education can also support with through saying that you can become anything you want. You can pursue educational also tracks if you want. And then doing something that makes a difference. This is very important also for young children. Of course, it doesn't always mean that every child has to become Greta Thunberg from Sweden and actually talk to world leaders about the climate issues, but making a difference in your everyday. For example, I have this doctoral student, Tina Nandar, who has worked in Sweden with very, very disadvantaged children in the at-risk areas. And so they have really been this kind of lost teenagers in the Swedish context. And they have really, the whole society worries about the guns and everything that is related to these kids. So when Tina has been taking these problem youth to elderly people's homes, so she says that they have become completely new people because they know how important they are, because this elderly person would not be able to go outside or have a chat with anybody if it wasn't for me. So they realize, oh, I make a difference to somebody's life. So she says that they have been like absolutely marvelous with everybody in there, and they have been completely like totally new people. So she has taken them many times to the same people to meet them and support each other. I mean, they have, because then these small things become big things, and they it strengthens the well-being for both the teenagers and the residents in those places. So, and then of course, like in the educational like implementation, you could talk about art and play and taking children to the nature, for example, all kinds of like creative things, because there are very different, for example, if you have like an eating disorder as a teenager, being able to draw about that or might actually be for some the only way, because it's so difficult to think or talk about it. So I have a teenager in my everyday near. I have like looked very closely to that kind of process, and it really can be very important for many to express themselves. I mean, it can be music, it can be anything else, but to find your own way of expressing your emotions is also very important. Okay, and so to sum up these dimensions, so basically the sustainable well-being out of these four. So you need to have like something like you have to have a relevant amount of everything in order to have a holistic well-being. So if there's, for example, having, loving, and being, but not so much doing, then the other three can compensate. But if there's a lot lacking from all of these, which, for example, in our big data sets from Finland, it showed that there's approximately 5% of youth who have very, very low resilience resources. So those kids and young people, they really need the support from us. They can't get it in their everyday otherwise. And then how can we support this in the everyday at school? So basically we can support the child's connection to themselves, talking about their own future, their own thoughts, their own emotions, but also giving them some worldview literacy. What kind of ways of seeing the world there are? And then also supporting the family ties, identity related to family history. Of course, like many school projects are focusing on this, like phone your grandmother and ask what they did as a child, etc. And that's, of course, all supporting the family connections. But then also to the peer group, it's super important that we do this, not only in the beginning of the school year to make the group somehow function together, but actually also observing how the break times go. Is somebody all the time on their own? Is there bullying? We have to really fight that actively. We have a big consortium in Finland with 3 different universities, and also the governmental bodies and health sector are involved in that project, where it's called Right to Belong, and it's got register data across like many decades and so on. And there we are trying to find new ways to support or basically fight exclusion and bullying and support the connectivity in the peer group and school communities. But then also supporting the child's relationship with the world, like the national history and narratives, like when you think of India's rich history, going to the important places and feeling that, oh, wow, we have all this richness here, and somehow making it a part of their own history as well. I will show you this first of all, because I think it's important to think about the operating culture of the preschool or school, like how much diversity do we actually include within? How much diversity do we see as our history and our community diversity? And what things do we push to the borders and margins? It can be cultures, languages, worldviews, identities, and traditions, but it can also be other things, like I said. So basically, ideally, we should have all of that as our diversity rather than pushing it to the borders. I can give you maybe an example of this as well. When we lived in Sweden, and my younger daughter was then 7, and my children spoke already Swedish because they had been in the Swedish-speaking preschool and school. But then the accent is different in Finland and Sweden. So my daughter went to school there in Swedish, but she had a different accent. And then one day the boys in the class, they had actually been bullying one of the teaching assistants, like laughing about his Swedish accent because he had moved from somewhere else. And then the teacher has said, "Oh, but Ellen," my daughter, "oh, but Ellen also speaks a different kind of Swedish. So, I mean, we are all different." So then my child comes home crying, saying like, "What's wrong with my Swedish?" Because she has spoken Swedish since she was 2. She is completely fluent. And then suddenly the teacher points her out as the different because and clearly like she doesn't belong to the group. She's, excluded in that sense. So I think even if her approach was like she was meaning well, but she clearly didn't do it as she should have there. And also, so this kind of value things that we have in the school community, for example, they come through in everything we do, in the partnership with families, in the learning environment, in supporting every child's development. So whatever color the bubble underneath is, that's influencing everything. So if we are actually properly inclusive, it shows in everything we do. And if we are not, then maybe we should. And I think we all have to shake our values sometimes and reflect on how we think of things, because we are sometimes blind to how we do these micro management things, like micro communication in the everyday. These are just examples of the articles we have done. I will show here this, but then tell about one other example of when I was interviewing these 6-year-olds in the previous project. That was videotaped. And then my colleague, Melissa Stevanovic, who is a professor in Tampere University, another university in Finland, she was analyzing the data with me. And she is in conversation analysis, not just education, but she's doing like the proper stuff in that methodology. So she said to me, "Anika, maybe you don't realize that when you raise your eyebrows like that in this picture, it's much more likely that the child answers A than B out of your options when you interview them." And I'm like, okay, because the examples that we had this was a value measure based on Schwartz's value theory, and there were statements always. So had a cat and I think like a sheep handles, and they were saying, like the puppet A was saying, like, for example, that I like to spend time with my grandmother because she's very dear to me. And then the other puppet said, I like to spend time with my grandmother because she gives me toys and money. So then some of these, obviously, because as grown-ups, we have the right answer out of those. So then when I was asking those questions, sometimes I had, like, without realizing it, raised my eyebrows. So the child could figure out which I thought was the right answer. But it was very useful feedback for me, that actually how this kind of micro facial expression influences the way that my values are transmitted to this child without me realizing it. So that actually was, maybe something I can conclude with, that we all have to really think about these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anika. I think that was extremely enriching conversation for all of us. I think all of us here think about the issue of diversity and polarizing worldviews quite dearly, and the way you've positioned well-being as central to human existence and existential resilience. And looking at young children's examples, I'm sure your work with youth and perhaps similar work with elderly would again generate a lot of understanding about how we see and operate within our worldviews. A few thoughts, and I hope you get some breaths after this long talk. Like you position the idea of super diversity, the diversity of diversities. And here, seated in India, our diversity of diversities is within every little family and engagement, every little school space, every neighborhood is extremely rich with this diversity, right? And I mean, we've been talking about how everydayness here generates a certain position of resilience to keep being at something and trying to, operate within the context. So with that, a few very practical things I think we could delve a little deeper into. When we say polarizing of worldviews, if you were to define that within different kinds of worldviews itself, the religious and the non-religious, how would you, articulate that? Could you get into a little bit of perhaps how would that operate? Yeah.
Yes, basically what we mean by polarization is that the ways of seeing the world are becoming more and more different from each other. So maybe there used to be, well, you took the example of religious or secular. So maybe traditionally people in many countries have been more religious and the societies have been more religious. But now we have many who have maybe more conservative values, and then we have some who have completely secular values, for example. And of course, there are diversities in both ends and everything in between as well. But this is what we mean by polarization, that they are becoming more and more different from each other, and sometimes also hardening values in the sense that the empathy is lacking, and that is when it becomes problematic. It's not a problem that people think differently,
Right.
but the problem is when the empathy goes.
Empathy for
For the other, or I mean, for people, for the ways of seeing. I mean, it's all right if, for example, in the classroom everybody thinks differently. We don't have to agree, but we have to not only tolerate but actually respect other people. And I think that respect is lacking, at least in Finland, more and more, because the value, the ends of the spectrum are becoming more and more different from each other. So then that often means that there's less and less understanding and less empathy.
Right.
And that is always a problem, because then if we are not, so we can think differently, but we should still somehow be able to live with each other and respect and ideally also love each other.
Right. Yeah. So interestingly, I've been reflecting on this, that we are in times where the diversity of worldviews and the homogenizing boundaries, and India positioned as a very secular nation, is interesting how our own worldviews and value systems operate. And what you spoke about family histories, worldview literacies. So that was another question I thought would be important to little bit unpack as to how does worldview literacy really operate, in the sense that in the Indian context, our constitution and the way we see education, it is in some sense um, um, appreciating diversity and looking at different religions. And this is just an example to say that every festival signifies a certain religious value and ethos of that community. And at schools, each of it requires a certain common approach to it. And it is valuable to celebrate religions. I understand that in the Finnish context, it's very different in the way worldviews and worldview education operates. So that is one part of my question. The other is that when we say worldview literacy itself, is celebration of festivals enough, or is there something more that we need to do to then be able to look at respect that you were speaking about in terms of education and the process of education?
Yes, that's a very complicated matter all round. So basically, when I say that this worldview literacy question is related to another European project where I was involved. So in, I think, October, we went to the European Parliament to deliver a white paper on this kind of report from the project, where actually this worldview literacy was brought as like one of the solutions to the growing diversity in the across European schools and societies. And basically, the argument there was related to worldview literacy is basically having enough knowledge about different ways of seeing the world. And with the knowledge, we know that then people are less and less scared of the difference. If you know that, okay, this person believes in this and this ways, so when you know more about it, you are less afraid of it. And when you are less afraid of it, you are much more empathetic, and it's much easier for you to somehow not only tolerate, but have this kind of mutual recognition, even if you would think differently yourself. The Finnish society is an interesting example because it has been so strongly Lutheran. And now basically it's what we call secular Lutheran in our article, because I think it's somehow also marginalizing all religiosity in the Lutheran context. So the blind spots are very curious in the Finnish system. And the worldview education, so we have compulsory worldview education in the Finnish system. The religious education or alternative ethics education, and it's all it's not it's non-confessional. All of it is non-confessional. So but it's all taught in groups according to one's belonging. So groups according to one's own religion, whatever that is, in the families that have many religions already within themselves, and then the child might think differently from the parents, etc., etc. So that's one of the problems. Then the other problem is that you have to, as a principal, you have to find suddenly like 10 different classrooms for the religious education class, and then 10 different teachers and all the teaching materials. And then, because some of the groups are so small, they are combined across schools, etc., etc. So, I'm sure that will end quite soon because it's not manageable anymore with the increased diversity. But I think when it comes to celebrating festivities, it's a lovely thing and a nice thing, but the problem sometimes is that then it becomes exoticizing of some traditions, and it's again very different to be equal in how you speak about the other, for example, and how you celebrate our tradition or their tradition, etc. So you have to be again very, very careful as a teacher about like how you speak about that. And I think that's also a problem in the Finnish classrooms, that the teachers, they are very highly educated. All of them have master's degree in primary school teaching. So I mean, it's not that, but I mean, this is a blind spot in the Finnish society, I can say, based on our research. So it's just not an opinion. So this kind of like lack of understanding religiosity sometimes, because many people have drifted so far from religions that they don't really understand why religion can be important to some people.
Right.
So I think so we did, for example, in one of the studies we did a pilot course to the teacher students, and they really appreciated it very much, because they got to know more about what religion can mean to different people and what it is to be religious, because so many people don't have that. And yeah, again, we all have our
So you were
blind
saying that
spots.
the teacher education program introduced a course for pre-service teachers? Okay.
Yes, I mean we have as a compulsory part of all the teacher education, they do have to have some worldview education didactics.
Right.
But this was a voluntary extra course that some students wanted to take part in, where some volunteers from different religious communities came to tell about what religion means to them and what is their perspective to life.
Right.
And the students really appreciated that.
Right.